that there's a dispute between the Rambam and the Ramban whether with the Hashmonaim that they became the kings of Israel, whether that was something to be as praiseworthy or not. So we're just going to look at the Rambam and the Ramban on this. So it's Maimonides and Nachmanides, where both of them discuss this, and then we're going to see another Ramban on this whole idea and discuss it in the context of history of exactly what the two of them may have been talking about and what periods they were talking about. So the Rambam this is his first. The Rambam usually does give an introduction to in his Mishnah Torah. He doesn't give an introduction to the different halachot, the different laws. He usually just tells you this is what we do, this is what we don't do. But in a few specific places, he does give you an introduction, the history of how something came about. He gives it for Avodah Zarah, he gives it for Chanukah, he gives it for a few different things. The history of the historical background to it. For Avodah Zarah, he tells you how Avodah Zarah came into being, and for Chanukah, he tells you why we celebrate Chanukah. So at the beginning of the Hilchot Chanukah, it's chapter 3 because the first two chapters are actually a Hilchot Megillah for Purim. But he explains this. I'm just going to read the English. We have the Hebrews on the page if you want it. This is my translation. If there's mistakes, it's probably my mistakes. So during the Second Temple period, when the Greeks ruled, they issued decrees on Israel, renounced their religion, and forbade them from studying Torah and performing mitzvot, took their money and daughters, entered the sanctuary and broke open the walls of the temple, defiled the holy, and greatly persecuted and oppressed Israel. So the Greeks weren't very nice to us in the time of the Second Temple, in the time of Chanukah. So this went on until the God of our forefathers had mercy upon us and saved us from their hands, saved us from the hands of the Greeks. The house of the Hashmonaim, the high priests, overcame them, slayed them, and saved Israel from their hands, and placed a king from the Kohanim, placed a king for the Kohanim. Kingship returned to Israel for more than 200 years until the destruction of the temple. So the way it sounds the way most people interpret the Rambam is that it sounds like the Hashmonaim were good people. God provided our salvation through the Hashmonaim. They were the ones who conquered it, who got rid of the Greek oppression, and they were the high priest, and they also became kings. And because of them, we had kings in Israel Jewish kings for more than 200 years until the destruction of the temple. So just to understand history there too, just so people know, that Hashmonaim around 40 BC, Herod became the king of Israel. I think it was 40 BC. He had taken after King Hyrcanus died. He was the last of the Hasmonean kings. He was actually not a king. Hyrcanus, we'll discuss this later. Hyrcanus was actually just a prince. He was more of the Nasi, and the Romans took away the kingship from him from 63 to 40 BC. But I think the Romans actually called it an ethnarch. But basically, he was the last one. After him came Herod, and Herod was the king, called himself king of Israel from 40 BC. And then after him, his kids took over, and his kids until the destruction of the temple. Actually, they actually were officially the king of Israel until 92 AD, 20 odd years after the destruction. But which I can't remember which one. But the son, who was the king from around 40 to 90 AD, actually marched with the Romans on Jerusalem to retake Yerushalayim from the Canaanites, from the Zealots. But the Rambam basically is saying it's a good thing that we had kings from Israel. We weren't under foreign rulership for more than 200 years. We had we had our own leadership for 200 years because of the Hasmoneans, and they were the ones who instituted this. So it sounds, at least from this, that they became kings. The kings from the Kohanim. This was a very good thing that the Hasmoneans and the Hashmonaim did. Vaychi is when Yaakov gives everyone, 11 of his children, brachot. Ephraim and Manasseh already got the bracha. He doesn't give a bracha to Yosef because he gave to his 2 kids, and he gives to the rest, or at least his 2 oldest kids, depending if he had more kids or not. The other 11 kids received their brachot they received these brachot, which were also prophecies. So the bracha for Yehuda was Lo Yasur Shevet Yehuda, that the scepter shall not leave Judah. So that's usually understood to mean that the Gemara understands this, everyone understands this to mean that the kings of Israel should be from Yehuda. Also, most leadership positions should go to someone from Yehuda over other tribes. The exilarchs, the Reish Galuta in Babel, was from the house of David, from the Shevet Yehuda. Also, the Beit Hillel, all the Nesiim in the like Hillel, Rabbi Yehuda Nassim, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon, all these people until the end of the Sanhedrin, all the Nasiim, all the presidents of the court were always from the house of David, which is Beit David, which is from the tribe of Yehuda. So we've got these two ideas that they're supposed to be the kings from Shevet Yehuda. You can't have a king from another tribe. And number two, that most leadership positions should be from Shevet Yehuda, but probably it's just better to be from Shevet Yehuda as opposed to it must be from Shevet Yehuda. You can have a shul president from another. You can have a Kohen being a shul president. Well, this idea is used for other things. It's an idea used by some about women being presidents of shuls or not. I don't want to get into that. Could they be in leadership position or not? But this idea that you have to have from the tribe of Yehuda in leadership positions is only that it's better to be that, and a Kohen would not be forbidden from being a president of a shul from this. But that's what this is used to understand. And Shaul was not from the tribe of Yehuda. He was the first king of Israel, Saul, and he was from the tribe of Binyamin. He was allowed to be king because there was no king from the tribe of Yehuda yet. It says the scepter shall not leave Judah, right? So if the scepter hasn't gotten into Judah's hands yet, into the tribe's hands yet, then you can have whoever you want to be king. After the scepter gets into the hand, after they first become king, after David becomes king, you can't have a king, at least according to one understanding, from any other tribe. Another understanding is you could have a king from another tribe, but you just can't have a dynasty from another tribe. So if you had one person coming up for 5 years to be king, that'd be okay, but it wouldn't go to his son automatically, or even non-automatically. Maybe the son would not be allowed to have it unless he was better than everybody else out there. He would not get any precedent over anyone else, as opposed to from Yehuda, where they get precedent, the kids would get precedent. You're allowed to have dynasties we have a dynasty of Beit David from Yehuda.
Is that how you would learn Shmuel?
Hmm?
Is that how you would learn Sefer Shmuel?
What do you mean by that?
Hashem was the one who picked Shaul.
100%. There's nothing wrong with that.
No indication that it would not have passed on.
Well, the Gemara discusses that if they were all kosher for all time, they could have had it, because the scepter was not in. There was no king from Yehuda yet. It's just once you have a king from Yehuda, you can't leave Yehuda. That at the time Shaul was the first king. Yehuda was never king. He had Boaz, who was the shofet. You had many shoftim from Yehuda. You had shoftim from other nations, from other tribes too, but they're allowed to be shoftim. There's nothing wrong with the shofet from any other tribe. But once you have a king from Yehuda, it can't leave Yehuda. So the Ramban understands the whole idea this way, that you can't have a king from another tribe other than Yehuda after David became king. It could have been anyone in the world. What I mean by anyone in the world is that the prophecy was not talking about David specifically. It was talking about the tribe of Yehuda. Just as a side point, you get into the question: what happens if you have a king from from a non-Davidic line of the tribe of Yehuda? Would that be allowed or not? Because according to this, it would be okay. But according to we need from Beit David or not, that's a separate question we're not going to get into. Let's just read this Ramban about what he thinks about the Hashmonaim. And this is the punishment of the Hashmonaeans. When they ruled in the Second Temple period, even though that they were very righteous and without them Torah and mitzvot would be forgotten from Israel, they still received great punishment. As the 4 righteous sons of the elder Hashmonaim that ruled one after the next, even with all their strength and victories, fell to their enemies by the sword. This punishment befell them in the end, as it is said, and this is the Gemara in Bava Batra, it is clear that anyone who claims to be from the house of the Hashmonaim is surely a slave, as they were all cut off due to the sin. Basically, when Herod became king, his father was he was the de facto ruler in the time of Hyrcanus. Herod's father was Antipas, and he was the de facto ruler. Yochanan Hyrcanus was a very weak person physically and spiritually, meaning in spirit. He had no enthusiasm. He was basically in bed all day. He was sick mentally and physically. And Herod's father basically befriended him and ran the whole kingdom. He gave the Galilee to Herod to be king. He basically manipulated the king to do whatever he wanted. After Hyrcanus died, basically Herod usurped the throne, killed a bunch of his brothers, and took over all of Israel. And when he did that, he killed every single Hashmonai alive, except for one woman who he kept alive, Miriam. because he wanted to have kids with Miriam, so he'd be able to continue the line and say that I am still the ruler of the Hashmonaim. There's only one sign of the Hashmonaim left. There's this woman. If I have kids with her, that's continuing the line of the Hashmonaim, so I am the legitimate ruler. According to the Gemara, she actually jumped off her balcony or off the roof of the house, of the palace, because she refused to, she did not want to take part in this plot of his, and she yelled out saying that Herod is actually a slave, he's not the legitimate ruler, and everyone should know that. And then she committed suicide, so he wouldn't be able to go along with his scheme. The historians say that, I think the Gemara, I'm not sure when this happened, but the historians say that he actually had 5 kids with Miriam, and they're the ones who became king afterwards, but she still could have committed suicide because she couldn't, she wanted to make sure everyone knew that this is what he was doing was not right. Now we're just going through a little more, and even though the descendants of Shimon was one of the five sons of Mattityahu, were punished for being Sadducees. They became Tzidukim later on. The rest of the descendants of the righteous Mattityahu only erred in that they took the kingship and were not from the tribe of Yehudah, and were not of Davidic descent, and completely took the scepter. Their punishment was measure for measure, in that God caused their servants to rule over them and cut them off. Herod's father, according to the Gemara, this Antipas was actually a slave to the Hashmonaim. It's not mentioned. I mean, I didn't see it mentioned that he's a slave in any of these the more contemporary history books, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't. He could have been a slave. It could have been a status of a slave who just ruled the kingdom for him and who manipulated his master to do whatever he wanted to do. It doesn't really make any difference. But it was measured for, according to the Gemara. The Gemara could be the way the Ramban is learning is from the Gemara that Herod was a slave. He killed all the Hashmonaim, and it was their slaves that took over them because they usurped the throne from the rightful tribe of Yehudah, and their throne was usurped from people who had no right to the throne either. It's also possible that they committed an additional sin. So that's the first thing, that they had no right to be king because they were not Judeans. They were not from the tribe of Yehudah. It is also possible, this is the second thing the Ramban is going to explain, that they committed an additional sin in their kingship. That the problem wasn't just that they were not from the tribe of Yehudah. That the problem, according to the Ramban, was that it would be bad for anyone, but it was extra. It was extra bad. It was extraordinarily bad that they became kings, because they were Kohanim, and the Kohanim were commanded, guard the priesthood on every aspect of the altar and the parochet and within, and you shall serve. I give you the gift of priesthood as a service of gift. Their service of Bnei Israel, their service of the people, everything is a spiritual service, not this physical service of becoming king. And the Ramban learns this, and the Midrash also learns. There's a Yerushalmi, which I didn't quote here, that the Ramban quotes, that learns that this is not just a nice thing that they're supposed to do this, but there's actually an Isser, there's actually a prohibition from them becoming rulers over other people in the land. They're supposed to be occupying themselves with the temple, and that's it. So he says that is, they cannot rule over others, rather they must only serve in the service of God, and they can't do anything else. So just to see here that we have these two ideas here in the Rambam and the Ramban. The Rambam seems to think that it's a very good thing that they became kings, and the Ramban thinks that it was a very bad thing they became kings. Just to understand the Rambam a little bit more, what does he do with all these ideas in the Ramban that you can't be king from another tribe? It seems that he doesn't hold he seems that he only holds of this dynastic issue of becoming kings. That you're going to become king forever. And maybe the Hashmonaim, every time, even though their kids became kings, it could be that if you read in the book of the Macabees, they say that at the beginning at least that they, and even Josephus mentions this, that when they became kings, they were saying this, until the prophet comes back and tells us what to do, we'll be kings. And until later on, we'll figure, so if the Mashiach comes, whatever the prophet meant, it sounds like it's Mashiach. When someone comes and tells us, this person is going to be from the tribe. This is the Mashiach. This is the person from the tribe of David, from the house of David, from the tribe of Yehudah. Then we'll let him become king. But we're just keeping the seat warm for him because we need to have someone ruling over the people. Seems to be at least that's what the Rambam would explain that Hashmonaim is seeing it as. The Rav Soloveitchik, who's also called the Rav, he has another idea in the Rambam. Is the Rambam, if you read the words of the Rambam again, he adds this idea that he placed a king from the Kohanim. Why does he have to emphasize the idea that the king is from the Kohanim? It could be that he's saying, I don't care what this Yerushalmi says, that the Yerushalmi says you can't have kings from Kohanim, and the Rambam is saying, you know what, we don't paskin that way, that Yerushalmi is not for halacha, and we could have kings from Kohanim, and there's no Israel kings from the Kohanim. The Rav Soloveitchik gave a different understanding of this idea of placed a king from the Kohanim, and he explained that the king from the Kohanim was even ignoring this Isser, we're not going to even discuss, he said the Rambam isn't discussing the Yerushalmi, not discussing the Yerushalmi, is it halacha? No, not halacha. Saying the attack, even though the Greeks, and read the Rambam in his history, the history we read at the beginning, that they took our money and they took the daughters of Israel, these people, most of the attack on us was a spiritual attack. So who are the people who are best to defend the spirituality of the Jews? I would think that would be the Rambam is saying, not just me, I'm thinking, the Rambam is saying it's the Kohanim whose whole job is to be spiritual. So they're the ones who have to run the country. They have the ones to defend the country physically. We need the ones who will defend it spiritually as well, because we need the spiritual defense, because that's really what's under attack. It wasn't our body under attack, it was our souls under attack. That's what the Rav said in the Rambam, and that's why he says it's the king from the Kohanim, because it was the special kiyum, there's something special in the Kohanim being the kings here, because they're the ones who had to defend us. That's just this disagreement between Rambam and Ramban. Interesting, were the Hashmonaim good or not? Now we're going to get into a bit of the history stuff, which I don't know if people find more interesting, less interesting. There's a Ramban at the beginning of Parashat Balotcha, which is in Sefer Bamidbar. At the time, just so you know what's going on at the time, right before Parashat Balotcha, the 12 tribes, all of them brought their korbanot to inaugurate the temple. They do to inaugurate the Mishkan. They do Chanukah Mishkan. 12 days, each of them bring a bunch of korbanot, all these different things that they bring. Each one brings the same thing, but independently, whatever drushes you make on it. And then the next, right at the end of that, the next parsha is Balotcha, and it's a commandment that God tells Moshe, go tell Aaron and his sons to go light the menorah every night. Now the question is that the Midrash tries to address is, why do we have this idea of the Chanukah Mishkan? Right here, we got all these korbanot being brought, and then the next thing is talking about lighting the nerot. All the laws of the Mikdash were given in Vayikra, Sefer Vayikra. It's called, like in English, it's Leviticus, because it's about the tribe of the Levim, Kohanim or Levim. It's about the service of the Mishkan. But Midbar is talking about the building of the. First of all, it's numbers. It has all the different censuses that were taken of. Censuses, I think, it would make more sense. Censuses from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Where was I? I lost my train of thought. Bamidbar. So you got all the censuses taken, but you also have a lot of history in there that we're going back and go conquer Israel. But there's not so many laws in Sefer Bamidbar, and especially laws of the temple. And so Balotcha is out of place. So the question the Midrash is asking is, why was this put over here after we're discussing everything that's supposed to be done, everything for Chanukah Mishkan, this historical event, which has more significance, of course, than just being a history book, but it is this historical event. And then we've got this random mitzvah, seemingly random mitzvah right after it. So Midrash explained that Aaron, when he saw that the 12 tribes all got to bring something. The 12 tribes here are not the 12 sons of Yaakov. It's the 12 tribes, including Ephraim and Manasseh, and taking out Levy. So you got all the other 12 tribes, except for the tribe of Aaron, doing this Chanukah Mishkan, inaugurating the Mishkan, and his Shevet has no part of it, and he was upset. So the Midrash says, this is the mitzvah that you're giving. They said, don't worry about it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe, tell your brother not to worry about it. He's going to get a better mitzvah. He's going to get the mitzvah of lighting the candles every night. So the Ramban says, this is a very nice Midrash, but Aaron was doing every single day. The person who was doing the avodah every single day was Aaron and his sons and his descendants, and ever for all time. He missed 12 days of korbanot. Why is he so upset about it? Number one. Number two, and if it is that he was upset about it, why is lighting the menorah anything special for him? The lighting menorah is just another avodah in the Beit Midrash. He did the korbanot every day. He did everything that they were doing those days. It was his job to do for the rest of eternity. It was his kids and his descendants. It was their job for the rest of eternity. So why is, according to the Ramban asking, why is the nerot, this menorah, going to be some sort of consolation for him in that he did not get to inaugurate it? So the Ramban explains that the inauguration here is really alluding to the inauguration, the Chanukah, in the time of the Hashmonaim. So, and this is, if you go through it, it's a very long piece, but I just quoted one part, and this is what he said. I'm reading the English again, and I found in Megillat Setarim, Rabbeinu Nissim was a Gaon who lived in Bavel around 9th century, 10th century, who related this Agada and said, I saw it in a Midrash, since the 12 tribes offered their sacrifice and the tribe of Levy did not, God said to Moshe, speak to Aaron and say to him, there is another inauguration, another Chanukah, that will have in it the lighting of the candles, and through your descendants I will perform miracles and liberate Israel, and this is the Chanukah of the house of the Hashmonaim. So the Ramban is saying that the Hashmonaim are the ones who are going that from the time of the Chanukah Mishkan, around 1,150 years before the Chanukah of the Hashmonaim, just so everyone knows, the 1,148 years, I think exactly, from the time of Yetziat Mitzrayim until, at least according to our Masorah, from the time of Yetziat Mitzrayim until Alexander the Great conquered Israel. Does anyone know how long that was? Or until he took over, not actually conquered Israel, until he took over from his father. Does anyone know how long it was?
Just under that.
No. Close. Exactly 1,000. According to it, so there's actually one of my Rosh Yeshiva in Israel, Rav Yaakov Meidan, he has this whole theory about why Jews, from the time, all our contracts are written from the time, in the same way the secular people did at the time. We dated everything from the time of Alexander the Great. That's how all of the Greeks dated contracts, and how we continue dating contracts until the Muslim conquest in the early 7th century, when they took over most of the Jews. So the question is, why did Jews date contracts like that? Why don't we use, like we do today, Tafshin Ayin now? Why did they use the secular count? So Rabbi Dan, he has this whole theory that, in general, we say at the beginning of right before Yetziat Mitzrayim, we get the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh, and we say Chodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodeshim. So he says, starting with that Nisan, that's when we have to start counting everything. And that's the first year of the Jewish calendar, not from creation. We don't care about creation. I mean, we do care about creation, but for many things, for halacha, for contracts, what we really care about is when we receive the Torah, which was the time which was Yetziat Mitzrayim, from that year on. So he says that when the Jews were counting from the time of Alexander the Great, it was actually like a little trick that we were playing. We just left out that little, today the year isn't Tafshin Ayin, it's really Hey Tafshin Ayin. Hey represents 5,770. Tafshin Ayin is only 770. So we live out the Hey. So in the same time, in their time too, they just left out the Aleph at the beginning, and they said year 148. Which is really year 1,148 from the time of Yetziat Mitzrayim. And at some point, I guess it could be that people forgot that's why we're doing it, and when the Muslims took over, we just continue using the secular calendar, whatever they used. But he has this whole idea of that's why we count. So when I say around 1,150, because it would be around 150 years from Alexander the Great until Chanukah. So plus 1,000 years, so it's around 1,150. That's just a side point, nothing to do this year. But my question here is that, at least in the Ramban, we saw the first Ramban that we saw. These Hashmonaim were great people, but they did this terrible, egregious sin. They took over the kingdom. They became kings. Very bad thing. The Ramban we see in the second one is basically giving praise to the Hashmonaim. And what's the praise they're getting? Is that Aaron is going to receive this nachat, is going to receive the nachat ruach, that he's receiving consolation through the action that they will be performing over 1,000 years later. It seems just to me strange that if Aaron knew the whole story, that these are people, you're right, these are going to be great people, they're going to get to do this mitzvah that all Jews are going to do for all of eternity. But these people, just so you know, they're going to be cut off. All of them are going to die out because they did this terrible sin. I don't know, when I hear that, it seems like they counterbalance each other. Like, I don't know how much consolation, how happy he would be if he were to hear the whole story. And I just can't imagine, at least that was trying to say to him. Like, they're going to do one good thing and one very bad thing, and they're all going to be killed for the bad thing they do, but they're going to be remembered for something good they did.
Like the opposite of what Abraham got.
What do you mean?
Abraham was told, your descendants will be forced to go in, but then afterwards they'll come out with great honor.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, but there's really, if you want to make someone happy. I mean, it's true. If you want to make someone happy, you're going to tell them, oh yeah, they're going to do something good in 1,000 years from now, and we'll leave out the bad details so we'll console him. It just doesn't seem that's something God would do when you're trying to console him. You'd find another way to console him. It doesn't have to be this way. Why do you have to use this way? I'm sure that God could think. I mean, God could think whatever that means, but I'm sure that there are many ways that Aaron could have been consoled without the use of the Hashmonaim, if the Hashmonaim were bad people. So I think to understand this idea that they did this sin and they're killed for the sin, and also that they were these great people who we honor and that we keep Chanukah for, I think you have to understand, I think we should look at the history of who the Hashmonaim were and why they fell and who fell and exactly what happened. So does anyone know, to start this off, 167 was when the Greeks went into the temple. 164 is when the Hashmonaim got back to the temple. So who was the high priest, the Kohen Gadol in 165? Anyone know? Like in between. So who wasn't it? Jason. It's my brother. It wasn't Matityahu, but this is my brother Jason. And so the high priest until 171 BC was Jason.
There was later a Hashmonaim.
What?
There was a Hashmonaim Jason also high priest.
Later. Yeah, okay, fine. But I remember this one.
I didn't remember this one.
Okay, fine. So until 171, and then and then he was killed by his brother Menelaus, and Menelaus was the high priest at the time of the revolt.
Oh, that's right, because he paid off.
Yeah, exactly. He paid off Antiochus. Antiochus put him in, and according to some of the historians, it's actually he was the one who basically got Antiochus to make all these bad decrees against the Jews. He was a very Hellenistic Jew. He made all these bad decrees against the Jews. He's the one who brought in the pigs into the temple for sacrifices, put up the altar to Zeus. That's what Menelaus did. So he was the high priest in 167. He was the high priest in 166, 165, and then 164. Chanukah happened. Who was the high priest in 163? Who was the Kohen Gadol? Anyone know? So Yehuda was the oldest brother. Was it Yehuda? Mm-hmm. No, it was Menelaus. He didn't get kicked out. He was the Kohen Gadol until Antiochus V killed him in 159 or 158 BC. The Hashmonaim saw no reason to kick him out. So what's going on there? I mean, the way I read this is that's the number. And now 159 BC. So Menelaus dies. We don't know who the high priest is for 7 years. There's no the history books don't even mention it. And then it's not until 152 BC we have even a high priest from the Hashmonaim. And the Yonatan was the first high priest in 152 BC from the Hashmonaim. So what was BCE? I shouldn't say BC. In BCE, from the Hashmonaim. Does anyone have any what's going on here? So it would seem to me at least that this is what the Ramban was talking about, and this is the Nachat Ruach that God was giving, Hakadosh Baruch Hu was giving Aaron. That at the time of the Chanukah of 164 BCE, when they took over the Beit HaMikdash, they were very firm Jews. They didn't want to do anything wrong. They wanted to make sure that we could do the avodah in the Beit HaMikdash. And you can't just kick out. What the Hellenists were doing, what the Greeks were doing, is they were the ones who were buying and selling the Kahuna Gedolah, the priesthood. And they're the ones who are doing this. That's not something the Jews do. That's not something religious Jews do. The Kohen Gadol is someone who, once he's appointed, he can't do the avodah on certain days because he's Tameh. And if he's Tameh on Yom Kippur, we put another one in. But as soon as he's Tahor again, he gets to go back to his job. We don't kick anyone out for any reason, unless the Beit, unless the Sanhedrin tells us we can kick him out. So in 164 BC, when Yehuda Maccabee and his brothers took over the Beit HaMikdash, he couldn't do anything about it. Menelaus was the Kohen Gadol. If he's going to follow what we tell him he has to do for the avodah, or he just stays out except for on Yom Kippur and he does what he's supposed to do on Yom Kippur, there's no reason we have to kick him out. There's nothing we could do about it. They weren't usurpers of the throne. That was the throne. There was no throne to take. They left the Kahuna Gedolah. They didn't become the kings of Israel at that point at all. Yonatan in 152 BC is the first high priest Kohen Gadol from Hashmonaim, probably because the because the seat was vacant, and they just got their own person to go in there, not because they usurped it from anyone, but they went through the normal process. I mean, I'm pretty sure that most of the Jews at the time liked the Hashmonaim. So when it was time to pick a next Kohen Gadol, they picked someone from the Hashmonaim. He was then captured and then killed, or if an elephant fell on him, depends on which way you're looking at it. And then his brother Shimon became the Kohen Gadol after him. So Shimon was the first one when he became to call himself Nasi of Israel, to call himself the president of Israel. And that was not something bad either. There's as we discussed earlier, it doesn't seem there's any problem to have a president of a shul from another tribe. The only problem is to have a king from another tribe. So I'm not sure if what Shimon did at the time, and I think that's why he only called himself Nasi of Israel. He wouldn't call himself anything else, was because you couldn't. He's a religious Jew. He couldn't call himself that. These are the people that Aaron is getting his nachas from. These are the people he's getting his consolation from for this other thing. These are from Jews. These are religious Jews who are doing everything. They didn't do anything wrong. It wasn't until 104 BC when Aristobulus became king for 1 year. He actually his father had split the high priest. He was both the Nasi and the Kohen Gadol. And when he died, he said, I'm going to give the Kohen Gadol to one son, and I'm going to give the Nasi to the other son. One was Alexander Yanai, one was Aristobulus. Aristobulus says, I don't like this. And he locked up his brother in jail, he locked up his mother in jail, locked up everybody in jail. And he became both high priest, and he became the first king of Israel. And he was then killed, and then his wife, MiTzion Hamalka, let out. She had no kids, so now she was Yavama. She had to have her brother, who was locked up in jail, let out of jail to do Yibum, so he could do Yibum, perform Yibum, and so then MiTzion Hamalka married Alexander Yanai, and Alexander Yanai was king for 25 years, and he was the one who was basically the first real king of Israel. Alexander Yanai, the Gemara talks about as being this terrible person. Many times he was very. MiTzion Hamalka, the Gemara says, was the sister of Shimon ben Shetach, one of the people in our transmission, one of the heads of the Nisim of the Sanhedrin, and he probably was. And you read the history books too. The Sefer Macabees and Josephus. Everyone talks about that, and he was probably allowed to go in and out of it. He was a ben Beit, at least at the beginning, in the palace. But Alexander Yanai at some point became bad. And then when he died, his wife MiTzion Hamalka took over. She was good for 9 years, and then but she wasn't. She was just a regent. She wasn't actually a queen. She wasn't a king. She wasn't anything else we'd call in Israel. And then after that, they only had 3 more years of kings of Israel. And I think this is what the Ramban is talking about. That we had 60 years of peace, of these good people being the presidents of Israel, if you want to call it, the Nisim of Israel with the Kohen Gadol. And there was nothing wrong with that, because they were doing what was halakhically, they were doing what was, at least according to their interpretation, what was proper halacha. They weren't trying to take the kingship away from Shevet Yehuda. They were just, we need to have rulers. In the book of the Maccabees, it discusses that when Yonatan and then Shimon became high priest, when they became Kohen Gadol, and when they said, we're going to be the rulers until the Navi comes along and tells us otherwise. So basically they're saying, until Mashiach comes, we're not creating a dynasty here. We're saying we didn't have someone ruling over Israel, because we no longer have this foreign government over us. We're going to have our own rulers. We're going to be independent. We need to have someone ruling the country. We're going to do it because we think we're the best at it. But when we're told that there's someone better at it, and who is the rightful heir to the throne, we'll give it to him. We have no problem with it. And that's what they did for 60 years. It's later on, when they became these Hellenized Jews again, that they decided that we're going to become king again. And it was those. It was Alexander Yanai, he wasn't kicked. God didn't kick him out right away. But for the 25 years that he was king, he was king for 25 years, and after him, there's only kings for 3 years after him. After that, the Romans came in, they took over, and then you had John Hyrcanus being the king for 23 years, but he wasn't actually king. He was actually an ethnar, which is the term the Romans used for basically a governor, for a local governor from the people of Israel from 63 to 40 BC, and then Herod took over the whole country in 40 BC. But that's, at least to me, that seems to be what's going on here, is that for 60 years the Hashmonaim were very good. This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was saying to Moshe, to tell Aaron, that you're going to have these great kids, you're going to have these great descendants who are going to have their own Chanukah to Beit, that even after the temple is destroyed, they're going to be lighting their candles. Those are going to be gone for all of eternity. You're going to be lighting candles, korbanot, these korbanot that they started. The Mishkan is going to be destroyed. The Beit HaMikdash, two Beit HaMikdash, Batei Mikdash will be destroyed. And the korbanot will go away for a long period of time. But after your descendants come along, this lighting of candles will never go away, and it will be here for all of eternity. And this lighting was done, and the MiTzion were done through these very kosher people who didn't do anything wrong and would not even consider doing something wrong. It happens to be their descendants did something wrong, but you can't hold them responsible for their descendants. And that's, at least to me, it seems to be. And then what the Ramban is saying is, now why did they lose? So now, according to this, why did they lose it? Because later on they forgot what it was to be, what their role was. Their role wasn't to be king. It wasn't to rule over everybody else. The role was to make sure the country runs. They're the prime minister and president of the country. What we use today is more of a president or prime minister, is that you're someone as a representative of the people. They needed someone. They're the ones who are willing to stand up and revolt. They're the ones who are willing to lead the country. If someone else isn't willing to lead, we'll take it. But as soon as Mashiach comes, they're willing to give it up. So it seems that's why, according to the Ramban, that they lost it. It could be, according to the Rambam too, that they lost it for the same reason, that they didn't deserve it. Thank you.